welcome to the Thursday edition of the Don and Cherry's Grapevine podcast. You know, Dad, on our last podcast, we kind of ended talking about Bob Probert and Troy Crowder, and we had a clip of him on the Grapevine show. And so we're going to run that clip again, and then you can talk about Troy Crowder and the Bob Probert story.
And here comes Bob.
Tonight in the Grapevine, we got Dino Ciccarelli, the Detroit Red Wings. But first of all, let's introduce the heavyweight champion of the NHL, Bobby Probert. My buddy. All right. Yes, sir. I'm getting so carried away, I'm putting it over here. Now, look. What would I do without you? On Rock'em Sock'em 5 and 4 and 5 and 3 and 2 in them all. This guy is the star of them all. Is he not? Most popular guy. Now look. Willie Plett, I'm going to ask you a question. Willie Plett did something I couldn't believe what he did. I used to be a pretty good fighter in my day. I don't know whether I can take this guy, but what are you laughing at? Anyhow, he did something. When I used to be through fighting, I don't know whether it happened to you or not, my neck I'd always have a stiff neck from the guys pulling on the sweater. I mean, I'd be walking around like this all the time. But Willie Plett, I saw him in a fight one time. He cut the back of his sweater, and he just went down about that far, stitched it up. When you pull it, give away. Do you ever think, you don't even tie yours down?
Well, I used to, but then for a while there, I tried it the other way, and it seemed to work, so I just kept on.
How come no tie downs? I mean, I don't understand that.
Just forgot.
You just forget all the time. Tell you. Yeah, I tell you, he doesn't need them, I guess. Now, Joey Kosher, the Bruise Brothers, his hands are really bad. How come your hands are all right? How come you don't hurt your hands?
I've been lucky. Joey had a bad experience in the minors his first year, and he hit somebody in the tooth, and it was infected, and he almost lost his arm. So they had to operate, and he's got a big scar on it now.
Boy, I'll tell you, a lot of guys, when they hit, they just want to hit the guy. When Joey hits, yeah. Joey wants to put it out the back of your head. That's the only problem with him. But anyhow, let me ask you one last question before we get to Dino. Do you find it tough? Every city you go in, there's a young gunfighter, and if he ever beats Probert, you know, it's a feather in his cap. Is it tough?
Well, it's happened a lot in the past, and yeah, you know, it gets old, but it's still a job for me, and you know, I gotta stand up for my reputation, I guess. I
got a story to tell you. When we do our show, I'm gonna tell you a story. This is a true story. I was in New Jersey. I think it was New Jersey or the island. I forget who he was. Troy Crowder was there. It was 2 years before he had his fight with you, right? So I'm sitting there watching the morning skate. He was in the playoffs, and he come up and he says, "You know, I'm as tough as Probert." I said, "Sure you are, kid." And he said, "Someday I'll prove it." He still hasn't proved it, but that's it. That's the way it is. 2 years before he met him, they were talking about he could hardly wait to play him, and must be tough.
So, Dad, go into detail. There's a lot behind the Bob Probert, Troy Crowder story. So start about the time what happened when you first met Troy. I know you talked about it on the clip, but tell us again.
Well, here's the story, and I can remember like it was yesterday. And we used to go to the morning skate. Ron and I used to go to the morning skate all the time, and everybody used to go to the morning skate. And we're sitting there, and this big tall guy come up, and he said, "Hi," he said, "my name is Troy Crowder." And I listened, yeah. He was one of the Black Aces, eh? And he said, "I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to be in the National Hockey League, and and he said, "The first guy I'm going to take on is Bob Probert." And he said, "I'm as good fighter as Bob Probert, and I'm going to," and I'm sure. And I said, "I hope this guy survives." So anyhow, unbeknownst to me, and unbeknownst to a lot of people, he was Troy Crowder could throw him pretty good. So sure enough, and
it was about 2 years later, right?
Well, it was about two years later. He'd been learning and everything. And him and Probert, like I said, Probert was a gunfighter everybody wanted. And they had a fight, and it was a dandy. And I'd have to say it was pretty even. Troy Crowder, and he made a few statements after.
Yeah, I think he cut Bob over the eye, though. Yeah. That was a big thing. So everybody made a big deal that, he cut Bob Probert.
Yeah, and he made a few statements, just a couple of statements. So now everybody is looking back and coming to Detroit. He's coming into Detroit. It is unbelievable. So, you know, we're kind of important people with Hockey Night in Canada. We phoned down and tried to get a ticket. You cannot get a ticket.
So it was you and Ron wanted to go.
Ron and I wanted to go. We were going to drive down to see the game. And I don't think it was televised or something. Anyhow, we were going to drive down, and we phoned for a ticket, and they said, we don't have, honestly, Don, we don't have any tickets. So we had 2 tickets up in the nosebleed. We were up in the right at the very, very top. So it was like a heavyweight championship fight. The puck was down at one end, and Crowder and Probert were at the other. It was unbelievable.
But remember, you were telling the story when you and Ron walked in.
Oh, yeah,
and you bumped into the ref.
And the linesman. And say, look, we came a long way to see this fight. We drove down. We don't want you jumping in right away. And the linesman said, are you kidding? We're looking forward to this too. So everybody in hockey was looking forward to it. And sure enough, they're back and forth, and all of a sudden they started, and it was he hit Probert hit Troy Crowder so hard his helmet went about 10 feet in the air.
Well, they fought twice.
Yeah,
they fought twice. The first one, Bob won, but it was close.
It was 5-4.
The next one, though, I think Bob was more ready.
He hit him so hard his helmet went 10 feet in the air. It was and the crowd, again, the crowd went absolutely wild. I just don't understand it. I don't understand. And I, nobody really gets, they're talking about these guys get fight and concussions. Nobody really, guys got cut and things like that. I did it a long time. But this fight, you couldn't believe. And I remember we had the long drive back, a long drive from Detroit. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. I stood up. I remember I had a leather coat on. And I stood up, and everybody give us, Ron and I, a standing ovation. And Bernie Nichols was facing off, and Ray Scampanella, that was his name, he was facing off. So they stopped, and they watched us leave. So now we get on the elevator, and there's policemen there, and we get an escort, and Ron goes on, and they push them off. I said, okay, let them on. But everybody loved that fight, and Crowder did not disappoint. He showed up, and it was a great fight. And Probert was one of the absolute best. I very seldom he ever lost.
The one thing that you mentioned is that back then, not all the games were on TV, so not too many people could see it.
That's right.
And so everybody was like, "What happened? What happened?" Everybody was waiting to see what happened. It was exciting.
Naturally, on Coach's Corner, I showed it to Coach's
Corner.
Well,
I got a quick story with about Ty and Probert, where we, so everybody, the next time they were going to fight was going to be back in Detroit. So I bought 2 tickets early on. Got 2 tickets. I think you got them for me, and a buddy of mine went down. So we drove down, and again, same thing. I've been to heavyweight fights in Vegas and fights in Vegas. And it's the same feel, like you're just a buzz in the air. So we're all sitting down, and everybody was excited. And they said, now for the scratches for the New York Rangers, number, was he 24, Ty Domi. And the whole place just started screaming, because Ty hurt himself, that got hurt the day before. I think he hurt his shoulder or something before. The place just went nuts. They were just like, I can't believe this. And we drove down the whole thing. And then those 2 fought in New York.
Oh, yeah.
And they said, I think it was Stan Fischler was talking about it when they had the rematch. He said it was like a heavyweight fight was going on at Madison Square Garden. They said the tickets were going for over $1,000.
Oh, well, people wanted to see him. And I remember when Probert used to be wait for a face-off, they used to play that record "Bad to the Bone." and he never. But he was when he was on TV, he was one of the shyest guys you'd ever. All the fighters are usually quiet-spoken and very shy.
So you have this theory, Dad, that there's fighters that like to fight and some fighters that have to fight. So was Probert? Which one was Probert?
I think he didn't mind fighting, but after a while, he had the reputation. He had to fight.
So it's like, as you said, the gunslinger coming in. Now you at one time were like that, weren't you? That you had to go in and.
Oh, I remember. Okay, we'll end on this. I get hit so many times. But I drove out. It
was a family. Remember, you were tired?
Well, it was you and I and Rose, and you were in the back seat. And I remember I had a 60 Pontiac, 2-door. Oh, it was a beautiful car. Pontiac Laurentian. It had Star Chief on the back, had a Star Chief, a nice car. So anyhow, we drove out. And
where were you from Hershey to?
Oh, okay. I got. This goes on and on. I could tell
Well,
this.
it's a good story, though. I mean, no one would believe it.
Okay, I went out with Claude Dufour, who was a goaltender at the Montreal camp, at the training camp. And Sammy Pollock called me in. I'll never forget this. I'm getting on and on. But Sammy Pollock called me in, and he says, I understand you're out drinking last night. I was out with Claude Dufour. We had about 2 or 3 beers. And he says, well, we don't, nobody was honest with him. And he says, well, we don't do that. We have plans. And you know what? They had plans for me. I found out later that maybe to coach the Ottawa Hull Club, because I don't know, anyhow, I was going to be a player coach. But anyhow, what happened was he said, we're going to send you to Washington. I said, well, that's Washington. That's good. I didn't know they were in the American Hockey League. And somebody spelled it out to me. I didn't even have to say Spokane. I spoke Kane. I said, where the hell is Spokane? So we drove out, and I got there, 3,200 miles, I think it was, and the trainer was a great guy in Spokane. And
how many days would that have taken? Like I would have been in the back seat for and
I don't know, 2 days, I think.
2 days. Oh boy.
2 or 3 days. Anyhow, it was a long drive. I remember it was a long drive. I remember we were going up going up
The Rockies.
the Rockies were so long. I thought we were going down. That's how I mean, it was just unbelievable. So anyhow, we get there. That's not the story. So the story is we get there. And the trainer is a great guy. I can see him now. He gave me new gloves, because
you're a
new
new
gloves
player.
and new equipment. But fighters never have new gloves. But I didn't want to be a whiner or anything. I said, and I kept the gloves. And we walked into Cal Palace,
So that's in San Jose,
San Jose. No, San Francisco.
San Francisco.
So we walk in, and and I told this story before because I think it was the greatest beating I ever had. And there was a big sign across the whole thing. Larry McNabb, heavyweight champion of WHL. And I knew it was not going to be a good day for me. So sure enough, we get into a fight again. I get tied up with the linesman. That's why I'm kind of paranoid over it. And he hit me so many times. And we were down on our knees, and he was trying to bounce his fist off the ice up into my face. So I put my head down, and we were down there, and he hit me so many times on the top of the head that I couldn't comb my hair. I used to have hair back in those days. I couldn't comb my hair for days. And I often tell the story. When I didn't have any money, I would give $100, and I don't have much money now, but I would give $100 if I could get 5 seconds left because he was out. I put him out, by the way, in the fight. He broke his hand on my head. But anyhow, I remember his hand swelling, and he was showing it to the trainer. I could have filled him in there. And I was still dizzy. I only had those 5 seconds back. So what was the point?
So it was the gunslinger. You knew that going in,
I knew I had to go. That's right.
You had to go. That's the thing.
I don't know why I had to go because we must get into the toughest defense of all time. But that was the same way. I'll tell you one thing. It wasn't as good fight as Probert and Ty and those guys. They was really good. I get hit. It was not fair because he hit me 22 times. I know it was 22 times because I was counting them. But when you fought, you those days, as you said, there's some guys. You take Ryan Nugent Hopkins and
Sean Monahan. And
Monahan. They did not know how to fight. They fought because they were mad at each other, and they're the toughest fights of all because they were really throwing them. And when you get a guy that's really afraid in fight, boy, you really have to be careful because he'll do anything when he's afraid. If you fight another good fighter, you kind of go like McNabb and that, you'll get it. But when you fight a guy that hasn't fought before, he's fighting because he's mad. So anyhow, that's enough on fighting. We've had a lot of fun. And I thought Calgary and Edmonton, one of the highest rated of all time. Everybody could hardly wait to get through the Toronto game.
So they were promoting it. They said they were promoting the next game. They play last game of the season. Yeah. They play again. I think in Edmonton. And everybody they were already promoting it. So they're going to play one more time. But
I have to admit, I'm at the color guy and Louis and the guy.
They did a good job. And you know what? I think
they were good.
The refs did a good job. They didn't go crazy the refs could have wrecked that game by calling a million penalties.
Yeah.
And they did a good job not going nuts.
It's not the present. I don't have to say it now because I'm not getting paid. But it's not the present regime, as they call it. that put the instigator rule in. It was put in a long, long time ago.
Gil Stein was the commissioner.
Gil Stein, and they put it in because they didn't know what they were doing.
And as you say, they can't go back.
They can't go back. As I said before, they can't go back because if they do, the left-wing pinkles will go in and say, see, they're advocating violence. And they can't go back, and it's tough because if you interfere, if you say somebody does something to Crosby and you interfere, you could get 2, 5, and a 10. And if you get too many of them, you get 2 or 3 games. Nothing they can do about it, and they can't go back on it. And therefore, we have all our stars usually hurt all through the season. Take a look at them. You'd always hurt. I guarantee you what's happened to McDavid would not happen to Gretzky, guaranteed, with Semenko and McSorley.